Hello, my name is Boris Giltburg. I'm a pianist and this is a tutorial on Schumann's Papillons Opus 2. The Papillons are Schumann's first piece in a form which he himself invented. A suite of short character sketches or scene sketches uniting together to form a very colorful whole. Later we have the Davidsbündler Tänze Opus 6, and finally the biggest climax of this form is the Carnival Opus 9, but all the elements are already there. It is a piece of pure musical theatricality, and we need to make sure that in each one of these short pieces the mood is captured to perfection. We have very little time to do this, but the material is so rich and so rewarding that it will itself help us. There is a strong literary backstory to Papillon, which is really well presented in the preface to the score, so I will not dwell on it. You can find all the information in the preface and the commentary. And in the end, the music has to stand on its own. Many in the audience will not know the backstory, and we cannot really explain it to them in words, so the music must stand on its own accord. The introduction is literally the curtain going up and presenting us the stage. But already here there's a little bit of magic. So we have this passage going upwards, this sense of yearning, this sense of expectation. It is open and trusting, mezzo forte, but then it is repeated like an echo from far away, and already there we can create this first wonder in the audience. So we need to judge very precisely the timing between the ending of this and the echo and the kind of sound we want. So this can be singing and open, and this not just quiet but a little bit fainter to simulate this idea that it comes from far away. So maybe a little bit less weight of the hand. And then, even though he puts a fermata, it leads very naturally into the first number. So I would not do the fermata too long a stop. It's just a natural comma, breathing. The first name of the piece was not Papillon, but Waltzes and Polonaises. And indeed, we have quite a few waltzes and polonaises. Here we start with a really floating waltz. So I would strive here for a very light, transparent sound. He writes dolce and piano, so I would not go for a heavy, concrete, materialistic sound like this, because that immediately grounds us. This is the real world, whereas what we want is a world of imagination, fantasy, and magic. So a much lighter hand. Second, I would not obsess too much about playing every octave indeed legato in the fingers. It can be a kind of sliding of the hand on the keys. The more you can play legato, the better, but don't try to do convoluted fingerings just to make sure that everything is indeed legato. We have the pedal to help us, the continuity of the sound in our ears to guide us, because the first bar can be on one pedal. Several interesting things happen already in the second part of the phrase. First, we have this beautiful moment of color. So of course we don't want to stop on it like that, but just be aware of it. So it was all very clean harmonies and this chromaticism. But then the much more important dramatic change is the bursting out of this light floating world. It is something very present, very celebratory. It is also, however, very dangerous because these octaves are not easy and it's so easy to mess them up. So I would not rush too much. I would rather prefer to have control over the octaves and think of groups. We have one, then three of them, and then the ending. So rather than trying to jump onto the black notes, separate it into a different group. This will make it more easy and less likely to have a dirty note on the black keys. So this separation is in our minds. We don't stop here, but thinking of these groups while playing it with continuity will help us avoid this technical challenge. Now, here we also have the first repeat, of which there are many in Papillon and in all of Schumann's pieces, and we all need to decide what do we do with these repeats. There are no rules. You can play them all. You can decide to omit some. I would say in shorter numbers, it's better to play them. In longer numbers and longer repeats, it is a matter of taste. It's a matter also of when you master the entire piece and you play it through and you listen to yourself playing, maybe record it with a phone. And then sometimes you get to the end of a number and he writes a repeat, but so much has happened, and to go back a full page would almost feel too much. And then you feel it and you can judge piece by piece where the repeat is helpful and where it perhaps can be omitted. But here in number one, I would definitely repeat both phrases. And then once we get to the second part, bar 9, so see how much he puts into 4 bars. So first of all, we have a kind of jumping gesture, but only for 2 bars, and then we have a completely different. So it's like within 4 bars, he takes us out of the first world he created and then brings us back. So we need to show both things. Ending the first phrase, light, jumping up and landing with a gentle flick of the wrist up. And on the heavier landing note, you can do a kind of outward motion with your wrist, which would help create this dance gesture. And then the exact opposite. These are sliding and only diminuendo. So he doesn't write any dynamic, but I would treat bars 9 and 10 as having a small crescendo. And maybe even a little bit of a accelerando, and then a ritenuto and diminuendo, going back to the opening world. Note how this is all short, and this is long and with pedal. So this is another little bit which we can show to the audience. That is to say that even between bars 11 and 12, there is another difference. So this is legato but short in the left hand, this is legato and long in the left hand. And once again, bursting out and landing on a long note finally. And then out of a blue comes one of the most uncomfortable and difficult numbers in the entire piece, this opening of number 2. Very dramatic, very boisterous, fortissimo, and it seems just an arpeggio up the keyboard. It's very easy to mess, and the one going down is even more difficult. And here in the end, same idea, divided into groups. I play it 1-3, 1-3, 1-3, and if you think in these groups, there's a good chance you will position the hand correctly and it will be clean. Then the second part of this number is a beautiful dialogue. And here there's a variation. We have the original text, which is the same as the first phrase, just in pianissimo, but there's also a note saying that sometimes Schumann played it like this. And I find it so beautiful and so expressive that I would incorporate it definitely, whether in the first time you play this, in both that is, or just in the repeat. Speaking of the repeat, there's an option of repeating the entire number or just the last 8 bars. I would repeat it completely. It is so short, so fleeting that it's really nice to hear it all again. Number 3, if we spoke previously about floating sounds, here it is as down to earth and concrete and present as can be. So I would maybe put a pedal on each one of them to round the sound a little bit, because shorter will be, it's a bit tack tack tack, so not quite the sound we want, and with a relaxed wrist and finger activity. And the same thing in the second phrase when the right hand takes the melody, and now we have these horns or brass. And now a little break here, because we're gonna get a surprise. This unexpected note deserves a bit of time and attention. The two hands unite on this unexpected F natural. And now we have once again horns. I played 1-5, 1-5, all of them, to have this kind of steady projecting position of the hand, with a locked wrist this time and a relaxed forearm. Note that the first 2 phrases are forte and the last phrase is fortissimo. So keep a bit of dynamic range for the first phrases, not play your loudest, so we can have this step up in bar 17. And then a small thing about the pedaling in the last phrase. If we do pedal on every note, then we have this slur, which is not great. So I would leave the pedal out on the quavers, whether they come in the right hand or in the left hand. And in the last bars, with the diminuendo, you might want to relax the tempo a little bit. What it will also do is make sure that these remain as horn notes, like in the second phrase throughout. In general, something to say about all numbers here. The moods change every few seconds, everything is fleeting, almost nothing comes back. So we have one chance of a first impression, like in the whirlwind of a carnival, where we see a face, we see a figure, and before long they are gone. And we have just this moment of recognition. So do not let any change of color, mood, tempo, articulation, of which there are so many, go unattended. Always show them all the love and care so that the audience may perceive them and enjoy them fully for the few seconds that we hear them. It is essentially theater played out at the piano. So after the concrete number 3, we once again go to a light-footed fleeting one, with this kind of lift here. So he writes an arpeggiato of everything. You can also try arpeggiating, but keeping the right hand as an octave. Both things work nicely, but the important thing is this lift, which is achieved by pedaling until the chord and then lifting the pedal at the moment the arpeggiato ends. This gives this like one kind of gesture which is nice. Color here. And the middle section, once again, a very brief change of character into something light and fleeting, even more so than the beginning. There's so much stuff even in these few bars. So we have these accents on the A's, like little bells. Then we have crescendo and a subito pianissimo, but without a ritardando at first. And we also have these tritons, and then, which is also a nice thing to show. Now this line. it's already coming to an end in a kind of closing gesture. And as a contrast to all the staccato, this can be very legato and sung. And then we have a repeat of the opening, but with a change. So first time it was, and now. So we can definitely show that. Make the sforzando a little bit more, stretch the distance to the upper note a little bit more. It's not difficult for us. We could play it in tempo, but imagine singing it. And this fifth is definitely something which requires a bit of time. It's a bit of an effort. The same thing, and it ends instead of a forte here. It ends in fortissimo. So very decisive gesture. Number 5 is interesting as a beautiful duet between the hands. So we have the melody, but we also have, he wrote himself, basso cantando, singing bass. Now this doesn't sound like much of a line, but if we bring it into relief, if we bring it into focus together with the right hand, it will be a beautiful combination. So it's worth working on each hand alone to make sure we can control the lines and then play it in tempo without spending as much time as I did just now. And find the balance, the beautiful singing tone with a relaxed wrist, a kind of milking motion with the finger. And the same thing, landing especially on the second note. So you can think of the phrasing, not 1, 2, 3, but 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And now the right hand also splits into 2 voices. Keep always the pedal pure. So we might enjoy the purity of the harmonies. Here there's a duet. Be careful about the last and first note of each line, that they don't outpower the beginning or the end of the other line. So make sure you can hear both. And enjoy, luxuriate in this harmony. Again, melodic. And now theater again. Something is frightening. 4 bars and it is gone. Now we have a bit of a polonaise. And now perhaps the most beautiful moment of the number. This tension here. Here at the end of bar 16, for my hand, I cannot play this simultaneously while voicing everything correctly, so I take the B flat in the left hand. To make sure I can play the C melodic with the thumb of the right hand. And it continues. So this C is still melodic. And now all the voices. So we have and the remaining ones. And the repeat is even more heavenly. But never let go of the bass. It's easy in the beauty of the right hand melody to forget that the bass always should remain singing. And also do not forget the pause. Even if you decide to keep pedal between, still lift the arm to make sure this is the heaviest note. And the last bars, a bit of a coda, pianissimo for the first time, and this color, really love it. Here I take the E natural in the right hand as well. I still do the arpeggiation, but I just find it more comfortable. It's a very interesting ending. He wrote pedal from this note, meaning that the bass will be essentially the F. And in the bar before, I would still take pedal on every note. Number 6 gives us a new color, a new mood, which we've not seen before. It's some kind of stubborn, angry, slightly grumpy person. So note the heavy sforzandi. You can lean into them with your entire body, relaxed arm, and just use the shoulders and the shoulder blades to create the sound. And then releasing the tension so that the downbeat is always less than the syncopation. And note the pedal on the one note. He knew so well what he wanted. He didn't want to link the bass to the next chord, but he didn't want this to be short and sharp either, just lengthening the bass a little bit. I also take pedal on the pairs because I find them too dry otherwise, but see how the piano works and how the piano you're performing on is working, and of course depending on the acoustic as well. Here, relaxed wrist and slightly this energizer bunny motion with active fingers, so you sort of bounce the hand up the keyboard, each time grabbing the octave a little bit. But the key point is relaxed wrist. If you try to force your way through it, you will get tension and more often than not a harsh sound and or dirty notes. After that, a complete change of scenery, some kind of heavenly bells from afar. So several things to think about. How much pedal? I would hold long pedals as long as the harmony allows it. Maybe lift here. And also here, we have a separation of the hands. Versus. So it's nice at least once to show the left hand, to show to the audience that this continues and mirrors. And the other time you can show this. Also, something you can do in the repeat to play even softer, like triple piano, if you want. Then we go back to the original material, just this time instead of... it goes into a minor key. And here I would suggest a different production for these octaves. Instead of doing them light, with a relaxed wrist, I would play them a little bit more structured from the elbow. So then using the entire arm as one unit, going, so still bouncing, but not with the wrist, but from the elbow. It gives a more powerful, more punchy sound. And then even heavier and angrier here. And as always, a surprise by Schumann, subito pianissimo, right. I find that because of the mass of sound, it requires a little weight before the pianissimo. Otherwise, it's not clear, and a lot of activity in the upper voices. So maybe they have to be piano rather than pianissimo. Then yet another element, something elegant. And because he repeats, it's essentially the same motive 8 times. If we play it all the same, it's going to be boring. So find a change of color somewhere. For example, the 4th time could be a bit softer. A bit more than a relaxation here. maybe start the repeat mezzo piano a bit less and then do a crescendo. So invent something to make it interesting. He gives us the material, but it's also up to us to interpret it in a way which is interesting. Just to say, okay, he didn't change anything, he just wrote them the same, so we will play them the same. It is perhaps correct, it's true to the letter of the score, but perhaps not as true to the spirit of the score. And then the final return to the grumpy material and a final snap. So the most angry sound you can make without sounding harsh. So still relax the elbow, don't play this kind of flat aggressive sound. Despite the fortissimo, despite the sforzando, despite the mood, still enough control to relax the arm. From here, number 7 gives us some kind of folk tale. He writes an interesting instruction, semplice, play it simply, meaning not too much rubato, but he belies it by adding so many details. So we have these lines in the right hand, which sounds just almost banal. But then the left hand does very interesting things. So it has accents on the off beats 3 times, and then the most surprising ending you could imagine. So the right hand, semplice, I agree. But the left hand could be a little bit more complicated. Two small things in this phrase. This octave, treat it vocally, as if you were singing it. That means it needs a little bit of time and a sense of effort, resistance. A little bit, just a small touch. And the second thing, the color of this chord. It could be this kind of surprise or a disappearing kind of surprise. And because he has given us a repeat, we have a chance, if we want, to play both of them. It's up to you which one of the two or both. It's open to interpretation. This is all pianissimo, very soft. And now the second part is singing, full voiced. There's a bit of a danger of falling on the 16th note in the upper voice. What we want is the opposite, heavy, light, heavy. So just pay attention and reduce the weight of the hand as you approach the upper note. And now the beautiful color here. So this definitely warrants a little bit of time and a change of dynamic. It could be softening or it could be more sound, whatever you like. Just not let something like this pass without your attention. And you could lift the pedal here on the last two, just leaving these last two notes ringing in the air. A new mood, number 8, some kind of righteous anger. Relaxed wrist once again, and an shock-absorbing motion with the elbow. And here lean into the keyboard. Phrase from the third. And enjoy the inner voices. And the same material, but as if a filter has been changed and it's light and dancing. So he keeps the rhythmical element, he keeps the phrasing from the third. But the mood, of course, couldn't be farther away from the beginning. enjoy this. It's quite a harsh dissonance, but because it's so light and fleeting, we just feel it like a bit of tasty spice. And the color here. I would play this F flat with the third finger. You could of course play 2-2, but to make this a bit more melodic, 3-2 is better. Now, in the next phrase, we have two interesting elements. The word ritenuto, without him telling us where until. And the second is this arpeggiato on the second note. The arpeggiato is easier to explain. It's a kind of stretching of time. A kind of rhetorical rubato gesture. The ritenuto, maybe until here, and then going back. And I would maybe add another small relaxation of tempo here. And it's also a question what kind of dynamic he expects in bar 25. Is it still forte? Does it go back to piano? Up to you to decide. It could also do two different things the two times you play it. It could first go to piano, the second time forte, or the other way around. The ninth number, we have prestissimo. And the opening is very easy to understand musically. It is a kind of hyperventilating, agitated confusion of feeling and thought. That's how long it lasts, this confusion of thought. So some interesting elements here, the sforzando, and then the long notes. So I would play them quite a bit louder than these to create this ringing bell effect. And then we have syncopation in the left hand. So be aware of it and practice maybe at first a bit slower. Especially this. It's still, now it changes. It's still, be sure that you can hear it on the downbeat, the previous harmony. This sequence of dissonances tugging at us, creating tension. And now, still prestissimo, but again, a complete change of mood. This is a difficult passage because it has to be extremely light, very fast, pianissimo, and have all the notes. So what I find usually works, first of all, we're working slowly, play maybe not pianissimo, but a bit louder, just to make sure you have the position of the arms correctly. With a lot of finger activity, plucking each note from the keyboard. And the completely relaxed wrist, which I previously named the Energizer Bunny effect, so this kind of bounce. And then when you practice it slowly, you could also play it with each note played twice. It's a practicing technique whereby if you do it a few times, very steady with both of the notes given equal weight, when you then remove the extra note, you finally realize you have a lot of time between the notes to move your hands to the next note, and also it will make it all very steady and very precise. And then once you have it, you can start listening to the various voices. There's a lot of interplay between the voices. Sometimes it's the bass and alto that move, sometimes it's just the tenor, just the soprano. Be aware of all of that and always pay attention to the first note and the last note of each group. So it will be easy to play, but it's not what he wrote. So the last note of the tenor is still melodic. Then in bar 25, same material, but a little bit more melodic, a bit more hesitating. So you could take a bit of time on this. It's some kind of inviting gesture. There's another trick which you could employ here if you wanted. If you are finding that the upper voice is hard to concentrate on, play it a little bit longer than the others. You probably hear it as if the upper voice is louder, but it's not louder. I just hold it on a little bit longer, like a microsecond longer than all the rest. Compare it with everything being played exactly the same length. Versus. And you can do this trick with every voice you want to show. So if you want to show the tenor here, you could then do this trick with the tenor, play it a bit longer, and then we will hear it clearly. Number 10, you will not be surprised, a new mood once again. Something alert and maybe slightly militaristic, but the military side of it is softened by the fact that it is in 3, which we'll see in the carnival when the march of the Davidsbündler is indeed in 3. To make every note sound, keep the hand very close to the key and a lot of finger activity digging into the chord. So really going into each note. Same thing, finger activity, and show these splitting lines. And now lean into this. Now you might remember these heavenly bells. Now we encounter them again, but in their earthly form, fortissimo and present. They're very pompous and majestic, so you can enjoy this kind of presentation. And now for the rest of the number, we have a completely different thing. We have a kind of lilting accompaniment with a singing waltz above it. And because we have it twice, you have many options for varying things. You can play once with pedal and once without pedal, in this way the left hand is more clear. Then once you could go to the climax in bar 31, and once you could recede from it, or anything which your imagination suggests to you. Then bar 41, something very personal and ardent. And the same thing now, very innig, very intimate and close to your heart. And really enjoy the change of harmony from major and this. Then the waltz comes back, and then the pompous element comes back in bar 65. But this is pure theater. It's like we were cinematically in one scene, and then we see a short cut back to something we experienced before. So just switch the mood quickly in bar 65 to what we had in bar 17. So pomp and circumstance. Relaxed wrist always. And then the waltz comes back to finish the piece in its sweetest form. Note the little accents he put on the 2nd, 4th, 6th and 8th bar. So he wants it to open a little bit. Surprise? Or rather not a surprise, but a sense of wonder. And create a fake ending. Really just pretend that this is the end of the piece. It could have been. The arabesque ends like this. But then, once you've waited maybe 1 second too long, then you should have, number 11 comes in. Number 11 and 12 are both a kind of finale. 11 is the usual expected kind of finale. It is everybody joining together in a celebration. of this, use our energizer bunny motion, so relaxed wrist bouncing on the keyboard with active fingers. The same thing in this left hand. Now separate the rhythms of the right and left hand. This is one. And this has this syncopation, this kind of polonaise rhythm. Now the polonaise is in both hands. This should be with pedal. And as glowing a sound as you can do. How does one make glowing sound? Finding the right voicing. Maybe both tenor and soprano, because soprano on its own is too bright. The tenor will give it a kind of bronze, tarnished, softer horn-like sound. And then you have the harmony, the famous horn progression. Everything very soft in your arms. And of course, it wouldn't be Schumann without a dramatic change here. So lean into these forzandi. And even then, a change. So from legato, played from the upper forearm, to staccato, played with the fingers, with a relaxed wrist. Now, bar 12 and all the similar passages require a lot of finger work in the right hand. So it's a gesture, of course, going upwards, but we need the content as well. It's helpful to divide it into groups. We have one, then this group, and then this group. If you position your hand like this, it's not so difficult to play. And these groups, once again, they don't affect the actual playing, so it's not like we show them or make an accent. It's just for our mind to know that this is... the left hand continues with that polonaise-like rhythm. Again, finger work. Notice the variety of articulations. We have legato, staccato, and non-legato. So find the three ones to counterbalance each other. And the end of bar 15, this is legato, and this is not. And now again, this is legato, this is non-legato, slightly humorous. And now our horns, but in minor, so it could be softer, more singing. But the mood changes again in celebratory. So jump from the bottom, just using the downbeat as a jumping board. Pedal here. Now this is tricky. There's no quick solution. It needs to be with a lot of finger activity. The hand quite close to the keyboard. And not to rush. So don't try to get too fast to the note. If you play it steadily, then more chances of it being clean. And the coda of this section, a little bit like the same kind of very light jumping motion, but in pianissimo. So finger activity, but everything very soft. And you have this crescendo, it doesn't show where to. I would go to mezzo piano, mezzo forte, and then go back to piano here. Then we have a middle section, which would also have a middle section, so it's a kind of nested structure. Più lento, but notice that più lento doesn't mean lento, it means just a bit slower, more relaxed than the opening tempo. And we have this mosaic here, so we have the upper voice, then we have the thumb with accents, and the thumb in the left hand. So listen to all these elements come together and enjoy them. Make sure that you can hear them. color change. Of course, when you perform it, it has to be steady and flowing and in tempo, but when you practice it, make sure that you really can hear everything, because this is what will assure that the audience can hear it as well. And really enjoy this harmony in bar 39. So it's an unexpected cadence. Instead of this, it's... And now the middle section of the middle section. Changes every 2 bars, something dramatic and declamatory. Finger work, and then leaning into the notes. And this is really crawling, like something not quite clear and scary. But then it all dissipates, and like gentle rain, this material, I would go a little bit forward here because we were so stuck and frozen here. Then once you release the tension, it must go a little bit ahead. And then we have a full reprise of the section we had before, so no need to mention anything apart that the fact that instead of a crescendo here, he now writes a diminuendo, ending in a real pianissimo. And yet this is not the end either. After this finale, he writes yet another finale, starting it with what was known as the grandfather dance. There was a tradition of dancing this as the last dance of a wedding, with the idea that it would gently encourage the guests to leave. So my guess is that's why Schumann put this at the end. And then when it comes back after a short interlude, he magically merges it into the opening waltz of the Papillon. So the right hand disappears, and I would make the merge more seamless by already around bar 20 starting to disappear the right hand and focusing on the left hand. So we don't experience this as a sudden disappearance, but rather fading out. Now our beautiful dance. And now the two are combined. We have the grandfather in the left hand and the Papillon waltz in the right hand. Both are equally important, and therefore you should try when playing to balance them so they are equally heard. Usually it means giving a little bit more weight to the bottom voice, so to the grandfather dance, because the upper voice, by the virtue of being the upper one, is usually more audible. And then once again the grandfather fades out. Here, just leaving us with the Papillon. And now perhaps the most magical beat of the entire piece. We have a note which has to be held from bar 47 until bar 72. You can calculate how many bars that is. Over the top of it we have the grandfather dance. Turning around and around in the tenor. In the what we think is the soprano, we have the Papillon, which then begins also to dissipate. Schumann literally decomposes it, removing the last note of the phrase each time it repeats, and above it appears the real soprano, which is bells or chimes. And there was a note in a posthumous edition saying, "The carnival is over, the night ends, and the clock on the tower strikes 6." So we must build all these elements together to create an unforgettable scene for the audience. So I would really keep the pedal as he writes for all these bars, just playing the inner voices quietly enough so that we can still hear the bass and that they don't merge together too much. And then a long diminuendo, and then finally the chimes appear. In my opinion, the chimes don't really participate in the diminuendo because if they are the clock striking 6, they should be more or less equal in sound. So everything else fades away and they remain. And then we have a little post factum coda. The tempo can be, in my opinion, faster than the tempo of the main movement. It seems to grow, only to disappear into a subito pianissimo. Can you hear the A? I think this is the reason why he wanted it louder here. And then pianissimo, so the A remains. So it's the same A we had as a chime, now we have it here. And then the last bit of invention, we have a chord being unarpeggiated. Basically, you remove each note, and the question of how long to hold it depends on the piano. If the piano has a long tone, you can hold each note longer. If the piano tends to decay quicker, remove it as quickly as you can so that we can still hear each note as the others are lifted. To make sure you can still hear the A. And if you cannot play this without breaking, I would recommend a little cheat of holding this note with the middle pedal, which of course Schumann did not have. And I would keep the A a little bit longer than the rest, so that the A, the fading A after the chimes, is the last thing that remains in our ears. And this is the end of this Händel music tutorial. Thank you very much for watching.